And I'd like to say that my family and I thank everyone who has been with us since August 2017, when an impeachment complaint against me was filed by an individual and eventually endorsed by a number of congressmen. Some of you are personal friends. Some are part of a wider professional circle. Others are actually strangers, but we share in common a love of country and fellow Filipinos. You, all of you, not only those who are here with us this afternoon, but also all those who have supported our cause all of these months, you have been a real source of much-needed strength. When we look back, it has just been a mere 10 months. They have passed, and yet they have recalled for us many important struggles in our history as a nation. Struggles that tell of a history of manipulation by those who are in power. The trampling of God-given rights, disregard for the people's will, and a broken system that rewards wrongdoing and punishes those who dare to call out crookedness. They also echo the experiences of the majority of Filipinos, even today, who have had the odds stacked against them because of poverty, injustice, or simply the misfortune of being on the wrong side of those who are in power. My story is not unique. It is a mirror, and yet it is also a warning and a call to action for each of us and all of us together as a nation. So allow me to just briefly recall certain important points. At the time the complainant requested the Supreme Court, for certified copies of documents because of the hesitation expressed by some congressmen of accepting an impeachment complaint that was not based on personal knowledge. It was also at the time that the budget hearing in the House was going full blast. At that time, Professor Theodore Terre, the chief of the Public Information Office, who was part of our delegation to the House, relayed to me a message from Justice Diosdado Peralta, who was there at the House. And this was the message, that Majority Floor Leader Rodolfo Fariñas had told Justice Peralta that Speaker Pantaleon Alvarez had ordered the suspension of the deliberations of the budget of the judiciary unless all the documents that the complainant requested from the Supreme Court would be released. This same message was relayed to the Court and Bank before one of its sessions. The message was clear. The House leadership was going to hold hostage the judiciary's budget unless the Supreme Court cooperated fully with its plan to remove me. Intent on obtaining a budget increase for our reform projects, I filed a no objection letter to the request for the documents. After all, I thought at the time, it could do no harm because the judiciary has nothing to hide, and there was nothing in any document that would amount to evidence of any impeachable offense against me. I also chose to believe that this was a positive opportunity to demonstrate sincere and professional leadership that could stand up to scrutiny, which would in turn bolster public confidence in officials who encourage transparency and not opaqueness. Looking back, perhaps it was naive of me to think that our congressmen and women would take time to pore over the documents with a genuine interest in uncovering the truth, rather than blindly following the House leadership. I had hoped that by doing so, they would come to abandon their vindictive agenda and instead support integrity in public office. I believed in the rule of law and hoped that they did too, and could perhaps, just perhaps, be persuaded by reason to restrain their might. I filed a comprehensive verified answer to the impeachment complaint. All of my rebuttals were of personal knowledge, in contrast to the complainant's allegations where he practically admitted he knew nothing of what he was saying. I sent my counsel to represent me so that I could continue discharging my duties as Chief Justice. But the House Committee denied me the right to representation that all citizens are entitled to. What then proceeded was an attempt to humiliate me and demolish my character during the public hearings and in the media. Some of my co-magistrates testified against me. They tried to portray me as extravagant, unlikable, and even mentally unstable. Yet, I was ever ready to prove them wrong in a fair trial. Again, I had believed that while the public perception of me might turn negative because of the relentless attacks, it would be temporary. I would be able to still tell my side of the story at the Senate. I was actually surprised that instead of succeeding in painting me as a villain, the pettiness of the allegations became increasingly evident to the public as the hearings progressed. The House hearings were unveiled as a farce. Individuals and groups started to come out. Many of you were part of those who started to come out at that point in the streets and in traditional and social media. Patriotic Filipinos pushed back, and unexpected alliances were formed. And more importantly, they were formed, yes, to support me, but more importantly, to protect our democratic institutions against abuse. My belief in the wisdom of the Filipino grew stronger. From August last year until last month, calls for me to resign have been mounted by no less than the President himself, and from among my enemies within the judiciary. They even started politicizing the court, thereby stripping it of the independence that is so central to the effective performance of the judiciary's mandate. I called on all court officers and personnel to refrain from joining the political fray instigated by my enemies. I reasoned that only by remaining impartial could the judiciary emerge stronger and more respected at the end of the Senate trial. To add even more pressure, they initiated a tax audit on my past income and filed cases against 2 of my staff. I suppose they thought I would see resignation as a convenient way to stop the incessant attacks against me. But they didn't count the fact that this woman does not back away from a fight. Especially if it is a just one. I was fighting for the right of the public to hear the story of judicial reform, and the brave men and women, especially in the lower courts, who were soldiering on to establish the rule of law despite the odds. I would have made it easier for them to completely bend the entire judiciary to their will if I had voluntarily removed myself from office. But this was unacceptable to me because I swore to be a guardian of the Constitution and the rule of law. When I became Chief Justice, and I had fully intended to keep my oath. I was willing to be judged by the public whether I was correct about my understanding of servant leadership. At the close of the House hearing, if you remember, it became increasingly clear to them that the charges against me stood on shaky ground against the high standards of an impeachment trial at the more independent Senate. Neither the Justice Committee, nor the House leadership, nor even the complainant himself wanted to forward the complaint to the impeachment court. All kinds of excuses were given to delay the transmission, excuses that were tantamount to an admission that they had failed to establish any wrongdoing on my part. As far as I know, I am the only accused in an impeachment proceeding that had demanded that she go to trial forthwith. I did so because I was confident in my defense and that the law was on my side. But I underestimated how low they were willing to go to unseat me. In an abominable perversion of the rules of court and in total violation of the Constitution, the Supreme Court quo warranto usurped the exclusive power of the Senate to try impeachable officials. My accusers, refusing to inhibit themselves as prescribed by the rules of ethical conduct, also became the judges of my cause, diminishing all hope of an impartial trial. Worst of all, the quo warranto has made our courts, and indeed the entire civil service, constantly vulnerable to political intimidation, and thus unable to properly dispense their duties professionally and without fear. In the words of my colleague, the Supreme Court has committed seppuku without honor. I mentioned that my story is not unique. In fact, this attack on my office was preceded by attacks against other independent collegial bodies. The Energy Regulatory Commission, the Commission on Elections, the Commission on Higher Education. Never before have we seen an administration that exploited the intramurals within a collegial body as a proxy war against its head. This was also simultaneously carried out against independent bodies tasked with ensuring accountability and justice, in the form of calls for resignation and impeachment of the heads of the judiciary, the ombudsman, and the Commission on Human Rights, whose budget was nearly reduced to zero. It demonstrates the disregard that this administration has for the Constitution and the rule of law. No wonder that our rule of law index has dived to an alarming level, and the international community is increasingly concerned at the emerging lawlessness in our country. Lahat ng ito ay nagsimula nang si President Duterte ay naupo. At isa-isang binatikos ang mga pinuno ng mga nasabing ahensya at binitbit ang mga mapanira niyang panawagan ng kanyang mga alyado. Thus, the responsibility for the weakening of the rule of law is his. He has admitted that sowing intrigue and planting evidence have been part of his practice. To deflect attention from his guilt, he constantly proclaims that he will resign if proof is shown of his participation in each new debacle for the rule of law. And yet, when reminded of his public pronouncements and the conformable acts of his supporters, he and his people retort, "Is that proof?" And so the list of contradicting words and actions gets longer and longer as he continues to employ his strategy of spreading confusion. But truth has a way of coming out eventually. And he is making a mistake if he thinks the Filipino is so easily fooled. So I stand before you now, stripped of my authority and my position by an unjust decision. But I do not have to be Chief Justice to defend our laws and institutions. I live the law, as do all Filipinos who uphold the dignity of every Filipino. When we take up the cause of a voiceless Filipino, we live the law. Every time we show justice and compassion to a fellow human being, we live the law. Each day we resist the abuses of power and call out evil in government. We live the law. We live the law because the law is for us. It is our rights, our welfare, our protection, our solidarity. And we will continue to live the law and fight for our democracy and the institutions that safeguard it. From the time of our forefathers, our leaders have told us that we are a brave people. Yet today, we are being given a very different message, a confusing one that calls our very identity into question. Our very leaders are saying we have no strength, we have no will, and no resources to fight for our sovereignty. Profanities, cowardice, and ignoble pragmatism dominate national discourse. Hindi natin kaya, wala tayong pera, mamamatay tayo. Our sights have been set low by the very leaders who should lead us to pursue lofty visions for our nation and our people. Our morale has been crushed by their talk of hopelessness against foreigners. Our spirits have been weakened as our own people are verbally and physically brutalized. Through all that, the propagandists would have us pin our hopes on one man, a blasphemous, self-styled savior who is willing to kill. Someone who has unabashedly said he can replace Satan in might and monstrosity. It is blind idolatry to a president when people would have us overlook acts of injustice, unrighteousness, and viciousness. It would have us forget that all officials, Even the President himself are subject to the Constitution so that no human idol can ever enslave them. It would have us ignore and relinquish God's gifts of freedom, constitutional rights, and rights over our lands and territorial waters. What the peddlers of hopelessness fail to see is that we are rising, we the people. Because while our history is one of oppression, it is also one of amazing heroism and steadfastness to our national values. We are fighting, and we are in no mood for jokes, for flip-flopping, for lies, for propaganda, for improvisational governance. Marami nang nagugutom at masyado ng maraming namamatay. We are fighting against the viciousness the President has unleashed against the poor, the women, the religious, the lumens, the workers, whom he has directly or indirectly branded as his enemies. This President has attacked, and his supporters have attacked, many of those who dared question his actions. Yet, we will stand firm in our right, indeed our responsibility, to ask him the tough questions and take him to account. We will defend democracy, for it is only through democracy that will alleviate our situation as a nation. Bilang isang karaniwang mamamayan na nabigyan na po ngayon ng pagkakataong magtanong para sa taong bayan, sisimulan ko na pong hingin ang mga kasagutang hinihintay, lalong-lalo na ng mga maliliit. Okay po ba? Mr. President, we need to hear your honest answers to these nagging questions and many more. First, we are all reeling from high prices. There is less food for our table. Basic commodities are becoming unaffordable. What hope is there, Mr. President, for our economic future? And what is the basis of that hope? Second, how much more economic difficulties will we have to bear when your train 2, 3, and 4 comes hurtling towards us? Do you have a plan to help alleviate our sufferings? Third, how do you expect drivers to shoulder the high cost of your planned modernization of passenger jeepneys? Huwag naman po sana yung basta na lang silang mumurahin at sasabihin, magtiis na lang sila sa kanilang kahirapan. Fourth, you have budgeted 5 billion pesos for your confidential fund in just 2 years. 5 billion pesos. Not counting the huge expenses the government has incurred because of your trips home to Davao and abroad, with unprecedented large retinues of supporters. Paano naman po ang mga mamamayan na pati sa pamasahe ay kinakapos? Fifth, the firing of corrupt officials is a good step. But Mr. President, true justice requires accountability. Do you even intend to file charges against those officials? Sa nakikita po kasi namin, nare-recycle lang sila sa ibang pwesto. Sixth, your plan to change the Constitution will require an enormous amount of funds. Funds that could instead be used for the people's welfare. How much, Mr. President, has already been spent? And how much more do you intend to spend? And how much money will be needed to fund the new positions that will be created in a federal government and the many, many state governments that will be created? Magkano na naman po ang ipapataw niyong buwis sa amin para magawa ito? Pera po ng taong bayan ang gagastusin. Paano po mababantayan ang pondo para siguruhin tama ang paggamit nito? And not least, we are baffled as to the true purpose of your planned shift to federalism. If you truly intend to strengthen local governments, why do your allies want to give you centralized dictatorial powers during a long transition period? Totoo po ba na pag nangyari ito, hindi bababa yung inyong mga alyado kahit natapos na ang termino, bagkus papalawigin pa ng ilang mga taon ang kanilang termino? Sa hirap na dinaranas ng sambayan ng Pilipino, kailangan na pong tugunan ng gobyerno ang mga katanungang ikinababalisa ng nakararami. We have many more questions, including on the President's relationship with the government of China. His position on the West Philippine Sea. The proliferation of drugs from China. The killing of more than 27,000 Filipinos and the disappearance of thousands more. The situation of our brothers and sisters in Marawi. Freedom of speech and of the press. The constitutional rights of ordinary Filipinos. We will continue to ask these questions and demand answers. Perhaps it is fitting, as they forcibly closed a chapter in my life, we are opening a new chapter in the life of the nation. On the birth anniversary of God Jose Rizal. The unity we have forged these last months will be the foundation of a genuine people's movement that will hold government accountable for its actions and help enlighten Filipinos regarding important national issues, the first of all which is charter change. Lalaban po tayo! Tatayo po tayo! The Constitution will be our moral compass, and genuine democracy and social justice will be our true north. Two extracts from Rizal's message to the women of Malolos best capture our conviction and our purpose. And allow me to read it for you. And I hope they flash it on the screen. Men are born equal, naked and without chains. They were not created by God to be enslaved. Neither were they endowed with intelligence in order to be misled, nor adorned with reason to be fooled by others. It is not pride to refuse to worship a fellow man, to enlighten the mind and to reason out everything. The arrogant one is he who wants to be worshipped, who misleads others, and who wants his will to prevail over reason and justice. Raise your children close to the image of the true God, the God who cannot be bribed, the God who is not avaricious, the God who is the Father of all, who is not partial, the God who does not fatten on the blood of the poor, who does not rejoice at the plaints of the afflicted, and does not obfuscate the intelligent mind. Awaken and prepare the mind of the child for every good and desirable idea. Love for honor, sincere and firm character, clear mind, clean conduct, respect for God. Teach this to your children. And because life is full of sorrows and perils, fortify their character against any difficulty and strengthen their hearts against any danger. Sa bawat pagkakataon na tayo'y naninindigan, nagwawagi ang lahing Pilipino. At ito ang laban na hindi kailanman mabibigo. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay ang sambayanang Pilipino!
Laban ni CJ! Laban ni CJ! Laban ni CJ! CJ Sereno!
Ipaglaban!
CJ Sereno!
Ipaglaban!
CJ Sereno! CJ ng bayan!
CJ, laban po tayo. Laban! At meron po tayong mga kasama na magiging kabahagi natin sa pakipaglaban. Meron po tayong mga